They thought Russia would come with tanks, but in reality, Europe was paralyzed before the first shot was fired. Without explosions, without airstrikes, without open confrontation, cities in the West suddenly went dark, the power grid went out, the internet was down, ministry websites were hacked, people were scared but did not know who the enemy was. This is the face of New Age warfare, and Russia is playing it like a chess master in the middle of a global board. Europe is not facing a war like they learned about in military academies. There are no tanks on the border, no barricades or missile attacks. But unease is spreading from Germany to Lithuania, from France to Latvia. This is not an exaggerated fear or even a conspiracy theory. A series of real events triggers the alarm. The submarine cable in the Baltic Sea was cut, the ministry's IT system was hacked, and a hidden bomb was nearly sent to Ukraine from German territory. The European Union, of course, immediately pointed the finger at Russia, accusing it of being the mastermind behind all the chaos in its region. But the Kremlin just smiled. For them, this is not aggression, it is strategy, and the world, especially Europe, realized too late that they were playing on a field they did not control. War without form, without warning, and without end. Since the early 2010s, Russia's approach to dealing with opponents has changed dramatically. They no longer rely solely on military force, the forces they use are now much quieter and more difficult to counter. When Crimea joined Russia in 2014, the world focused on the armed forces. But there's something bigger going on behind the scenes. Local TV channels change content. The internet was flooded with political messages, and Ukraine's telecommunications networks were disrupted. The West calls it hybrid warfare, a combination of technology, information, economics, and military. But in Russia, this is called a strategy to survive foreign pressure. According to NATO and the European Union reports, since 2022, there have been dozens of cases of submarine cable cuts, power outages, and fake messages on social media that have divided European society. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen even stated that protecting vital infrastructure like this is now a strategic priority for the region. Some people may see this as a new style of war, but for Russia, this is a form of defense in an age when war is no longer fought in uniforms, but with data, public opinion, and the right timing. When the Russians didn't show up at the borders in Europe, many thought they were safe. But in reality, the damage actually comes from within. In Germany, back in May 2025, 3 Ukrainian citizens were arrested on suspicion of involvement in a plot to send bombs to Ukraine. International investigations suggest, that the operation may have been controlled from outside. Western media has blamed Russia, but no official evidence has been made public. In Latvia, the government has circulated guidance to civilians on how to spot foreign intruders disguised as tourists. They called it a precautionary measure because, honestly, suspicious activity has increased since the Ukraine war began. In the Baltic Sea, an undersea internet cable connecting Estonia, Finland, and Sweden suddenly went missing. Some have called it sabotage, but, again, no one has admitted it. Russia was accused, but no evidence was presented in open court. All these events raise one big question. If this is not really a war, why are many countries starting to feel like they are under attack? In this new era of conflict, doubt can be more destructive than weapons. Historically, Russia has been a militarily strong country. But since the early 2000s they have realized that fighting the old way will only leave them at a disadvantage against the larger, richer Western bloc. So since the era of Vladimir Putin, the strategy has changed. The focus is no longer on physical strength alone, but on how to create instability without having to intervene directly. According to a report by RAND Corporation, Russia sees domestic crises in European countries such as mass protests, disinformation, and social tensions as gaps that can be exploited. Russia didn't create the problem, but they can fan the flames. From Russia's side, this strategy is not considered aggression, but a defensive action. They feel besieged by NATO expansion since the 1990s. Each country that was once an ally of the Union one by one entered the Western Bloc. Russia then built a new way to survive. They no longer send tanks to the enemy's doorstep, but they infiltrate through opinion, cyber networks, and internal conflicts. For Russia, this is not a game, it's about preserving living space. And if the enemy can be brought down from within, why sacrifice soldiers? As incidents of sabotage, hacking, and political crises began to emerge, Western countries moved quickly. But strangely, they always come after everything happens. One of the key moments that shook European consciousness was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This war not only demonstrated classic military aggression, but also demonstrated how hybrid operations were used to precede and support a physical invasion. In the days leading up to the invasion, Russia launched a cyber attack targeting Ukraine's critical infrastructure. One of the intense attacks is the use of malware wipers such as Hermetic wipers and Isaac wipers, which are designed to erase data and damage computer systems. While it targets various sectors, including energy networks, the aim is to weaken Ukraine's ability to respond effectively to the invasion. Reports from routers confirm that this cyber attack is part of Russia's strategy to support their military operations. The European Union's lagging steps in its defense system can be seen from Ireland's actions in spending more than €60 million to buy a sonar system to detect potential underwater disturbances. Belatedly, after the Baltic Sea communication cable was cut, Germany began tightening its national digital security system after ministerial documents were leaked to Russian and NATO media. They still think in terms of framework. If country A attacks country B, then Article 5 will be activated, but Russia doesn't play on that board. Meanwhile, Russia has been forming special warfare, information and cyber forces since 2017. They are not only IT experts but also psychologists, social analysts, and even linguistics. The goal is not to destroy the system but to mobilize the opponent's way of thinking. Moreover, Russia is also forging silent alliances with disaffected countries to create new diplomatic circles of influence that are undetected by NATO's radar. That's why they are always one step ahead, because the West is busy defending while Russia has finished reading the chessboard. Even when Russia is accused of being the mastermind behind these attacks, Moscow only needs to deny it without any open evidence. It all becomes just a political accusation. While the West is busy explaining that Russia has moved to the next stage, war, which has long been imagined as the sound of tanks on the streets and fighter planes in the sky, has now shifted to something that cannot or is difficult to document. Russia is not the only country that understands this new terrain. The United States has long used covert operations. China is actively spreading its influence in Asia through opinion and propaganda. Iran and Turkey utilize proxies and formation designs. Even Israel uses digital spy technology. But the difference is that Russia doesn't just use tools. They made this formless war into art. While other countries are busy strategizing, Russia is already dancing on the geopolitical chessboard. Even Russia, has a military budget that's much smaller than the United States. Yet, Russia proves that power isn't just about money, it's about intelligence in reading the global map. In Africa, Russia is, strengthening its influence through private military companies and mining contracts. In the Middle East, they are present as an alternative power to America. This is evident in the efforts to bring the various Palestinian factions closer together through a conference in Moscow, and in Asia, including the Southeast Asian region, Russia's presence is beginning to be felt in the form of energy cooperation, weapons, and diplomatic influence. The world is no longer ruled by who has the most troops, but by who can control the flow of the story. And today, from Moscow office spaces to servers hidden underground, Russia is rewriting the way the world works. The West calls this aggression, Russia calls this a strategy. But for those of us watching from the fringes of Medan, this is a changing face of global power.